In the whirlwind of ancient history, a figure emerges whose unwavering faith would challenge empires and inspire generations. This is the story of Daniel, the prophet who faced kings, interpreted dreams, and survived the fearsome lion's den, an epic journey that reveals the power of true devotion in the midst of the severest trials. Our story begins in a dark moment for the people of Judah. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, a threatening shadow loomed over Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar, the powerful king of Babylon, had besieged the holy city. The scriptures tell us that the Lord allowed Jerusalem to fall, delivering Jehoiakim and part of the temple treasures into the hands of the Babylonian conqueror. Among the captives taken into exile was a young man named Daniel. Torn from his homeland, he was forced to embark on a journey of hundreds of kilometers across the desert to the glorious city of Babylon. Imagine the fear and uncertainty that must have filled his heart as he saw the city's walls rising on the horizon. But something in Daniel set him apart from the other captives, an inner strength and an unwavering faith that would soon be put to the test. Upon arriving in Babylon, Daniel and a few other young Jews were selected for a special purpose. King Nebuchadnezzar, in his cunning, ordered Ashpenaz, the chief of his officials, to bring some of the Israelites from the royal family and nobility. He sought young men without physical defect, handsome, well-educated, and intelligent, capable of mastering various fields of knowledge to serve in the royal palace. Nebuchadnezzar's plan was clear and calculated. He wanted to mold these promising young men in the image of Babylonian culture, erasing their Jewish roots and transforming them into loyal servants of the empire. The scriptures reveal that, for 3 years, Daniel and his companions would be immersed in the language, literature, and customs of the Chaldeans. The king even assigned them a daily portion of food and wine from the royal table, an honor that concealed a subtle trap. It was at this moment that a challenge arose that would test Daniel's integrity. The food and wine offered by the king went against Jewish dietary laws. Daniel could have easily given in, justifying that he was merely obeying orders. After all, he was a captive in a foreign land. Who could blame him? Good. However, the scriptures show us that Daniel chose a different path. He decided not to defile himself with the king's food and wine, displaying remarkable courage by asking the chief of the officials for permission to abstain from them. This act of bravery proved that, even in adverse circumstances, Daniel was determined to honor God above all. The chief of the officials, although sympathetic to Daniel, feared for his own life. What if the young Jews appeared less healthy than the others? But Daniel, moved by his faith, proposed a bold test. He requested that an experiment be conducted with him and his companions for 10 days. Nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. After that period, their appearance would be compared to that of the young men who ate the king's food. During those crucial 10 days, Daniel and his friends ate only vegetables and drank water, trusting that God would sustain them. And the result was surprising. The scriptures tell us that, after 10 days, they appeared healthier and stronger than all the young men who ate from the king's table. This miracle not only preserved Daniel's integrity, but also established his character before the Babylonians. In the following 3 years, we witness the flourishing of Daniel and his companions. The scriptures reveal that God granted these 4 young men exceptional wisdom and intelligence, allowing them to understand all aspects of Babylonian culture and science. And Daniel in particular received a special gift: the ability to interpret visions and dreams of all kinds. When the time came for them to be presented to King Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel and his friends stood out remarkably. The king, impressed, conversed with them, and found no one equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. As a result, they were chosen to serve directly in the king's court. The scriptures tell us that in every matter requiring wisdom and discernment, the king consulted them, and found them 10 times wiser than all the magicians and enchanters in his kingdom. Thus, Daniel, the young exile, found favor in the eyes of the most powerful king of the time. His faithfulness to God elevated him to a position of influence, paving the way for the extraordinary events that were yet to come. The young man who arrived as a captive was about to become one of the most trusted advisors of the empire, all because he chose to remain faithful to his God, even in a foreign land. Daniel's fame as a wise and upright young man soon spread throughout Nebuchadnezzar's court. His ability to interpret dreams, a gift granted by God, was about to be put to the test in a way that would change not only his life, but the course of history. One night, the powerful King Nebuchadnezzar had a disturbing dream. He woke up agitated, his heart racing, unable to remember the details of the dream, but feeling that it was of great importance. Determined to understand the meaning of this night vision, the king summoned all his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers. Before the assembled court, Nebuchadnezzar made an extraordinary demand. He not only wanted them to interpret the dream, but also to tell him what the dream was. "If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces, and your houses will become piles of rubble," the king declared, his voice echoing through the throne hall. The wise men of Babylon were perplexed. "There is no man on earth who can do what the king is asking," they exclaimed. The king's fury grew, and he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon, including Daniel and his friends. When Daniel learned of the king's order, he acted with wisdom and tact. Approaching Arioch, the commander of the royal guard in charge of the executions, Daniel requested an audience with the king. With a calm that could only come from deep trust in God, Daniel promised to interpret the king's dream if given time. Returning to his home, Daniel gathered his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Together, they knelt in fervent prayer, imploring God to reveal the mystery of the king's dream. It was a critical moment. Their lives, and those of all the wise men of Babylon, depended on the divine answer. That night in a vision, God revealed to Daniel the dream and its interpretation. Overflowing with gratitude, Daniel praised the God of heaven. "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power belong to him. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him." The next morning, Daniel was brought before King Nebuchadnezzar. The young Hebrew stood before the most powerful monarch in the world, ready to reveal what God had shown him. No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can reveal to the king the mystery he has asked about, Daniel began, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. Daniel then described the king's dream: a colossal statue with a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet partly of iron and partly of clay. A stone not cut by human hands struck the statue's feet, smashing it to pieces. The stone then became a great mountain that filled the whole earth. King Nebuchadnezzar listened in astonishment, as Daniel not only accurately described the dream, but also offered its interpretation. The statue, Daniel explained, represented a succession of kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar and his Babylonian empire were the head of gold. After him, other kingdoms would arise, each represented by a different metal, decreasing in value but increasing in strength. The stone that destroyed the statue, Daniel continued, represented a kingdom established by the God of heaven, a kingdom that would never be destroyed, and would put an end to all other kingdoms. This kingdom would last forever. Upon hearing this interpretation, King Nebuchadnezzar was so impressed that he fell prostrate before Daniel, acknowledging the power of the God of Israel. "Surely your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries," the king declared, his voice filled with admiration. As a reward for his wisdom, Daniel was promoted to a position of great honor in the Babylonian court. He became governor of the entire province of Babylon and chief of all the wise men of the kingdom. But Daniel, in his humility, did not forget his friends. At his request, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were also promoted to high positions in the administration of the province. Daniel's loyalty to his friends would soon be tested in a dramatic way. King Nebuchadnezzar, perhaps inspired by the dream of the statue, commanded the construction of a massive golden image. He then proclaimed that at the sound of musical instruments, everyone should bow down and worship the statue. Anyone who refused would be thrown into a blazing furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, faithful to the God of Israel, refused to worship the image. When brought before the king, their response was courageous and unwavering. "If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, know this, O king, we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Furious, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. The 3 young Hebrews were bound and thrown into the blazing flames. The fire was so intense that it killed the soldiers who threw them into the furnace. But then, something extraordinary happened. The king, looking into the furnace, saw not 3 but 4 men walking around in the flames, unharmed. "The 4th man looks like a son of the gods," Nebuchadnezzar exclaimed, astonished. Calling Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego out of the furnace, the king and all his court saw that the fire had not harmed them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. In the face of this undeniable miracle, Nebuchadnezzar praised the God of Israel, and decreed that no one in his kingdom could speak ill of the God who had saved the 3 young men so spectacularly. This episode not only solidified Daniel and his friends' position in the Babylonian court, but also served as a powerful testimony of the God of Israel among the pagans. The unwavering faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, even in the face of death, and God's miraculous intervention proved that the Lord was with his people, even in exile. For Daniel, these events confirmed the wisdom of remaining faithful to God, no matter the circumstances. His ability to interpret dreams and his unbreakable integrity had elevated him to a position of great influence. But the challenges he would face were far from over. The God who revealed mysteries through him and protected his friends from the flames would continue to use Daniel in surprising ways. The years passed, and Daniel continued to prosper at the Babylonian court. His wisdom and integrity kept him in high regard, even with the changes of power that followed. The young exile had become a respected man, known for his ability to interpret dreams and visions, and for his wise and measured counsel. One day King Nebuchadnezzar had another troubling dream. This time he remembered the dream, but none of his wise men could interpret it. The king called for Daniel, whom he had given the Babylonian name Belteshazzar, recognizing his unique ability. "Belteshazzar," said the king, "I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery is too difficult for you. This was the dream I had. Interpret it for me." The king then described a vision of a huge and mighty tree, which grew up to the heavens and could be seen from all corners of the earth. Its fruits were abundant, providing food for all. The animals found shelter under it, and the birds made nests in its branches. But then a heavenly messenger descended, and ordered that the tree be cut down, leaving only the stump and the roots. Daniel listened attentively, his heart heavy with the meaning of the dream. He knew that the interpretation would not be easy to give, nor easy for the king to hear. For a moment he was astonished, his thoughts troubling him. The king, noticing Daniel's hesitation, encouraged him. "Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation frighten you." Daniel replied with respect and compassion, "My lord, I wish the dream applied to your enemies and its interpretation to your adversaries." Then with courage Daniel explained the meaning of the dream. The great tree, Daniel revealed, represented King Nebuchadnezzar himself. His kingdom had grown and become powerful, its influence extending to the ends of the earth. But the decree to cut down the tree was a warning. The king would be removed from his throne and would live like an animal for 7 times, until he recognized that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men. With compassion, Daniel advised the king, "Therefore, O king, accept my counsel. Renounce your sins and your wickedness, practice righteousness, and show compassion to the needy. Perhaps then your prosperity will continue." Nebuchadnezzar, although disturbed by the interpretation, did not heed Daniel's advice. A year later, while walking on the terrace of the royal palace, boasting of his power and the wonders he had built, the prophecy was fulfilled. A voice from heaven declared that his kingdom would be taken from him, and immediately the king lost his sanity. He was driven away from among men and lived like an animal, eating grass like cattle, his body drenched with the dew of heaven, until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. At the end of that period, Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes to heaven, and his sanity was restored to him. He praised and honored the Most High, recognizing that his dominion is eternal, and his kingdom endures for all generations. The king was restored to his throne, with even greater honor and splendor than before. This extraordinary experience once again demonstrated the accuracy of Daniel's interpretations and the sovereignty of the God he served. Even the most powerful king on earth had to bow before the God of Daniel. Years passed, and the political landscape changed dramatically. Belshazzar, the son of Nebuchadnezzar, now occupied the throne of Babylon. One night of feasting and extravagance, Belshazzar committed an act of profanation that would seal his fate. The king, intoxicated with wine and pride, ordered that the gold and silver vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem be brought. He and his guests drank from these sacred vessels, praising their gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Suddenly the fingers of a human hand appeared and began to write on the wall of the palace. The king, seeing this, turned pale with fear. His knees knocked together, and his legs became weak. Belshazzar called for his wise men to interpret the writing, but none of them could. The queen, recalling Daniel, suggested that he be summoned. Daniel, now an elderly man, was brought before the king. Belshazzar offered him gifts and a position of authority if he could interpret the writing. Daniel, with the same integrity that had always characterized him, refused the rewards but agreed to interpret the message. Before revealing the meaning of the writing, Daniel reminded the king of the lesson that Nebuchadnezzar had learned about humility and recognizing God's sovereignty. He reprimanded Belshazzar for not learning from his father's example and for profaning the sacred vessels of the temple. Then Daniel interpreted the writing on the wall. Mene, mene, tekel parsin. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Peres, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, the prophecy was fulfilled. Belshazzar was slain, and Darius the Mede took control of the Babylonian kingdom. The fall of Babylon marked a significant transition not only for the empire, but also for Daniel. Under the new Medo-Persian government, Daniel once again stood out. King Darius recognized Daniel's exceptional wisdom and integrity and placed him in a position of great authority. Darius planned to put Daniel in charge of the entire kingdom, which aroused envy and resentment among the other administrators and satraps. They sought to find fault with Daniel's conduct regarding the administration of the kingdom, but could not find any. Finally, these men came to a conclusion: we will never find any basis for charges against Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God. So they persuaded King Darius to issue a decree prohibiting anyone from praying to any god or human being, except to the king for 30 days. The penalty for disobedience would be to be thrown into the lion's den. Daniel, upon learning of the decree, did not change his practice. 3 times a day he knelt down in prayer, giving thanks to his God, as he had always done. His faith and integrity were more important to him than his own safety. The conspirators, as they had hoped, found Daniel praying and reported him to the king. Darius, who had great affection for Daniel, was deeply distressed. He tried to find a way to save Daniel, but was bound by his own decree. Reluctantly, the king ordered that Daniel be thrown into the lion's den. Before the sentence was carried out, Darius said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." Daniel was thrown into the den, and a stone was placed over the opening. The king spent the night fasting, unable to sleep, worried about the fate of his esteemed advisor. At dawn the next day, Darius hurried to the lion's den. In anguished voice he called out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you from the lions?" To the king's relief and joy, Daniel answered, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight." The king, overjoyed, ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den. No wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. By the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were thrown into the lion's den, along with their families. This miraculous event led King Darius to acknowledge Daniel's God. He issued a decree to all his kingdom, declaring that all should fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. Thus, through his unwavering faith and integrity, Daniel not only survived changes of empires and palace intrigues, but also became an instrument for proclaiming God's sovereignty and power among the Gentile nations. His journey from young exile to counselor of kings is a powerful testimony to God's faithfulness and the impact that a life dedicated to him can have, even in the most challenging circumstances. After the fall of Babylon, the Medo-Persian Empire took control, and Daniel, who had served faithfully under Babylonian rule, found favor in the eyes of the new ruler, Darius. The king recognized Daniel's exceptional qualities and placed him in a position of great responsibility. In the book of Daniel, chapter 6, we read, Darius decided to appoint 120 satraps to govern the whole kingdom, and over them 3 administrators, of whom Daniel was one, so that the satraps would give an account to them, and the king would suffer no loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities, that the king planned to set him over the entire kingdom. This promotion, however, sparked envy and resentment among the other officials. They began looking for ways to discredit Daniel, but his integrity was impeccable. The scriptures tell us, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him, because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Daniel's reputation for integrity and excellence in work was so solid that his enemies could not find any fault in his conduct or administration. This is a powerful testimony to Daniel's consistency in living out his faith in all aspects of his life, even under the constant scrutiny of hostile eyes. Frustrated in their attempts to find fault with Daniel, the officials came to a conclusion. We will never find any basis for charges against this Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God. This observation reveals both Daniel's impeccable conduct and the depth of his religious devotion, which was known to all. Thus, they devised a cunning plan. Recognizing that they could not attack Daniel for any flaw in his character or work, they decided to create a situation where Daniel's very fidelity to God would become grounds for accusation. The conspirators went to King Darius and proposed, "O King Darius, live forever. All the administrators of the kingdom, the prefects, the satraps, the advisors, and the governors have agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, O king, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." This request was cunning for several reasons. First, it appealed to the king's vanity, suggesting that he should be the sole object of worship for a month. Second, it invoked a peculiarity of Medo-Persian law. Once issued and sealed, a royal decree could not be revoked. Third, the conspirators presented the decree as if it were a unanimous decision of all the kingdom's leaders, concealing their true motivations. King Darius, unaware of the true intention behind this request, signed the decree. He did not realize that he was being manipulated into creating a trap for one of his most trusted advisors. When Daniel learned that the decree had been published, his reaction demonstrated his unwavering faith and commitment to God. The Bible tells us, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room, where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. This passage reveals much about Daniel's character. First, he did not make any attempt to hide his practice of prayer. He could have closed the windows or prayed in secret, but he chose to maintain his usual routine of prayer, demonstrating that his loyalty to God was more important to him than his own safety. Second, the text mentions that Daniel prayed just as he had done before. This indicates that his practice of praying 3 times a day was not a defiant response to the decree, but rather a continuation of his long-standing devotion. Daniel was not engaging in an act of civil disobedience, but simply maintaining his fidelity to God, as he always had. Third, we note that Daniel's windows faced Jerusalem. This reflects the practice described in 1 Kings 8:35-36, where Solomon, at the dedication of the temple, asks God to hear the prayers of the people when they pray toward the temple. Even in exile, Daniel maintained his spiritual connection with Jerusalem and with the temple, the center of worship to God for the Jews. The officials, eager to catch Daniel in the act, went to his house and found him praying and asking God for help. They did not need to wait long or search much, for Daniel made no effort to hide his devotion. Immediately they ran to report to the king. "O king, did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, Anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, O king, will be thrown into the lion's den." The king confirmed that he had, and they proceeded. "Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel, and made every effort until sundown to save him. The Bible tells us that he was deeply troubled. This reaction from the king demonstrates the great respect and affection he had for Daniel. He realized too late that he had been manipulated, and that his decree endangered the life of the man he respected and trusted the most. However, the men insisted to the king, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be revoked." Here we see the trap closing in. The king, who had absolute power in almost all matters, found himself powerless before his own decree. The law of the Medes and Persians, which normally served to guarantee stability in the empire, now became an instrument of injustice. Thus, the king was forced to fulfill his own decree. With great regret, he ordered Daniel to be brought and thrown into the lion's den. Before this happened, the king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." These words of the king are significant. They demonstrate that despite his own decree, Darius recognized Daniel's devotion to his God and expressed hope that this God could perform a miracle. A stone was brought and placed over the opening of the den, and the king sealed it with his own ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation could not be changed. This act of sealing the den emphasizes the finality of the sentence under human law, but it also serves to authenticate the miracle that was about to occur. Thus ends the episode of the conspiracy against Daniel. What began as a plan to eliminate a political rival culminated in Daniel being thrown into a seemingly hopeless situation. The den of lions represented a certain death sentence under normal circumstances. The night Daniel was thrown into the den of lions was a crucial moment not only for him, but also for King Darius, and for the entire Medo-Persian Empire. This miraculous night serves as a powerful testimony to God's faithfulness and the importance of unwavering faith. After Daniel was thrown into the den, King Darius returned to his palace, but his heart was heavy with worry and remorse. The book of Daniel in chapter 6, verse 18, gives us an intimate glimpse into the king's emotional state that night. The king then went to his palace and spent the night fasting. He did not accept any entertainment that was brought to him, and he could not sleep. This passage reveals the profound impact that Daniel had on the king. Darius, who had been manipulated into signing the decree that condemned Daniel, now found himself tormented by the possibility of having sentenced to death a man he respected and admired. The king's fasting, his refusal of entertainment, and his insomnia demonstrate the depth of his anguish. During this long night, we can imagine the thoughts that passed through the king's mind. He likely reflected on Daniel's integrity, his devotion to his God, and the many times Daniel's wisdom had benefited the kingdom. Perhaps he also thought about the words he had spoken to Daniel before he was thrown into the den, as recorded in verse 16 of the same chapter. "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." Could it be possible that Daniel's God could perform such a miracle? As the king spent the night in anguished vigil, Daniel was having a completely different experience in the den of lions. Although the Bible does not give us specific details about what happened inside the den during that night, the final outcome gives us an idea. Daniel later testified, as we read in verse 22, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight." This statement suggests that while the king was tormented by anxiety, Daniel experienced a supernatural peace. Surrounded by beasts that would normally have torn him apart in seconds, Daniel was safe under divine protection. We can imagine that he spent the night in prayer, praising God for his faithfulness and protection. The divine intervention in this situation was truly miraculous. Lions are fierce predators, and a person thrown into a den full of them would normally have no chance of survival. However, God demonstrated his supreme power over creation, even controlling the natural instincts of these beasts to protect his faithful servant. At dawn, the king's anxiety led him to act quickly. Verse 19 tells us, "At the first light of dawn, The king got up and hurried to the lion's den. The king's haste demonstrates his desperate hope that Daniel might have survived. Upon arriving at the den, the king called anxiously for Daniel. His question, recorded in verse 20, reveals both his hope and his doubt. "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel's response must have been one of the greatest joys the king ever experienced. Verses 21 and 22 capture this exciting moment. "O king, live forever," came Daniel's voice from the den. "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king." The king's joy was immense. The biblical text tells us that he was overjoyed and ordered Daniel to be taken out of the den. When Daniel emerged, everyone could see the miracle with their own eyes. Verse 23 records, "And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God." This moment of rescue was not only a victory for Daniel, but also a powerful demonstration of God's power to all present. King Darius, who the night before was tormented by doubt and remorse, was now an eyewitness to the power of Daniel's God. The impact of this event was immediate and profound. Moved by the demonstration of God's power, King Darius took decisive action. First, he dealt with those who had conspired against Daniel. Verse 24 tells us, "At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones." This severe action demonstrates the seriousness with which the king viewed the conspiracy against Daniel, and serves as a warning to those who seek to harm God's servants. More significantly, King Darius issued a decree that would change the religious landscape of the entire empire. Verses 25 to 27 record this impressive decree sent to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language throughout the earth: "Peace and prosperity. I issue a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom, people must fear and revere the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, and his dominion will have no end. He rescues and saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." This decree represents a dramatic change. The same king who days earlier had prohibited prayer to any god except himself, now ordered that everyone in his kingdom should fear and revere the God of Daniel. Daniel's testimony and the miracle he experienced not only saved him, but also paved the way for the knowledge of the true God to spread throughout the vast Medo-Persian Empire. The miraculous night in the lion's den had lasting repercussions. The Bible concludes this episode in verse 28 saying, "So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian." Daniel's faithfulness to God, even in the face of death, not only preserved him, but also elevated him to an even greater position of influence. The impact of Daniel's life and his miraculous experiences did not end with his deliverance from the lion's den. His legacy continued to influence not only the Medo-Persian Empire, but also future generations. After King Darius's decree that ordered everyone in his kingdom to fear and revere the God of Daniel, there was a significant change in the religious atmosphere of the empire. The book of Daniel tells us that he prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. This prosperity was not only material, but also spiritual, as the knowledge of the true God spread. Daniel, already advanced in age, continued to serve as a living example of faithfulness and integrity. His life demonstrated that it was possible to remain faithful to God, even in a hostile and pagan environment. This must have been a great source of encouragement for the other Jewish exiles living in the empire. In addition to his role as a royal administrator and counselor, Daniel also received a series of important prophetic visions. These visions, recorded in chapters 7 to 12 of the book of Daniel, encompass a vast panorama of world history, from Daniel's time to the end of days. In the 7th year of King Belshazzar's reign, Daniel had a vision of 4 great beasts representing 4 kingdoms that would arise on the earth. This vision, parallel to Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the statue, offered a divine perspective on the flow of human history. Later, in the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign, Daniel had another vision, this time of a ram and a goat, symbolizing the Medo-Persian and Greek empires. This vision provided surprisingly accurate details about events that would occur centuries later. Perhaps the most famous of Daniel's prophecies is the 70 weeks found in chapter 9. This complex prophecy offers a timeline for the coming of the Messiah and events related to the history of Israel. These prophetic visions establish Daniel as one of the major prophets of the Old Testament. His prophecies not only provided hope and guidance for the people of Israel during the exile and in the following centuries, but also became an important foundation for Jewish and Christian eschatology. Daniel's impact extended far beyond his own time. Jesus referred to Daniel as a prophet in his teachings about the end times, giving additional authority to Daniel's words. The book of Revelation in the New Testament makes several allusions to Daniel's visions, establishing a prophetic continuity between the Old and New Testaments. Daniel's legacy is not limited to his prophecies. His life of integrity, courage, and unwavering faith became a model for generations of believers. The story of Daniel in the lion's den in particular has been a source of inspiration for those facing persecution for their faith. Daniel's influence can also be seen in the apocalyptic Jewish literature that flourished in the following centuries. His writing style and symbolic visions influenced works such as the Book of Enoch and the Dead Sea Scrolls. In practical terms, Daniel's life offers valuable lessons on how to live faithfully in a secular or even hostile environment. His ability to maintain his faith and integrity while serving in high positions in a pagan government continues to be a relevant example for believers working in secular environments today. Daniel's wisdom and his ability to interpret dreams and visions also established a precedent for understanding that true wisdom comes from God. This reinforced the idea that those who are faithful to God can receive special understanding and discernment, a theme that echoes throughout Scripture. The book of Daniel, with its thrilling narratives and prophetic visions, continues to be studied and debated today. Scholars and theologians continue to explore the implications of his prophecies, while ordinary believers find inspiration in his unwavering faith. Daniel's life, from his youth as an exile in Babylon to his later years as a respected prophet and statesman, is a powerful testament to God's faithfulness and the impact that a life dedicated to him can have. Through challenges such as the diet at Nebuchadnezzar's court, the interpretation of dreams, the fiery furnace, although Daniel was not personally involved, and the lion's den, Daniel and his friends demonstrated unwavering faith and unbreakable integrity. Their experiences not only preserved them, but also led pagan kings to recognize the power of the God of Israel. Daniel's prophecies provided hope for God's people during difficult times, and continue to offer perspectives on God's plan for human history. His legacy of faithfulness, wisdom, and courage continues to inspire believers today, reminding us that no matter how challenging our circumstances may be, we can trust in God and remain faithful to Him. The story of Daniel teaches us that true greatness does not come from power or position, but from unwavering faith and integral character. His example challenges us to live our own lives with the same dedication and trust in God, knowing that He is faithful to sustain us in all circumstances.